Hello, and welcome. In this video, you're going to learn something most people never dare to face: how the human mind hides its mechanisms of manipulation, persuasion, and emotional control, and how Carl Jung uncovered them. Every human being believes he is free, but freedom inside the psyche is an illusion. Our emotions, our attractions, even our moral choices are often puppets of forces we don't see. Jung called them the archetypes, living patterns buried deep in the collective unconscious. They move through us like invisible hands, shaping what we love, what we fear, and who we trust. When a man begins to live with a woman, these forces awaken. He doesn't just meet her personality, he meets the hidden theater of his own mind. Every gesture she makes pulls a secret string inside him. He thinks he's reacting to her, but he's reacting to his own projections. Jung warned that what we call love is often the collision of two unconscious systems, each trying to complete itself through the other. At first, it feels divine. Later, it feels suffocating, because the same energy that draws us toward intimacy also exposes our weakness, the desire to control what threatens our fragile sense of self. The mind hates mirrors, and the woman, to the man, becomes one. Through her, he sees the parts of himself he tried to bury: need, fear, jealousy, tenderness. Instead of integrating them, he fights them. He argues, withdraws, dominates. But every argument is just a battle with his own shadow. Jung described the shadow as everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. When we repress it, it doesn't die. It waits, and relationships are the perfect battlefield for it to rise. The silent manipulation, the guilt, the emotional blackmail, these are not strategies we consciously design. They are the language of the shadow trying to protect the ego from annihilation. Most men live their entire lives as hostages to this inner war. They think they are reasoning when in fact they are rationalizing. They believe they are choosing when in truth they are being chosen by patterns older than civilization itself. Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Fate, then, is not written in the stars. It's written in the parts of you that you refuse to see. When you start observing these mechanisms, the world changes. You notice the subtle manipulations in daily life, the smile that hides need, the compliment that seeks control, the silence that punishes. And you realize that you too play these games, sometimes with words, sometimes with absence. The ego survives through control. It fears genuine contact because real connection dissolves illusion. To live with awareness is to live without armor. That's why few people choose it. The unconscious offers comfort. Consciousness demands death, the death of every lie you built to feel safe. Carl Jung didn't teach men to dominate women, nor women to submit to men. He taught humanity to face the inner manipulator, the puppeteer behind every emotional reaction. He said love is not possession, it is confrontation. To love is to let the other person reveal what you hide from yourself. The hidden truth every man must know before living with a woman is this: you are not entering a relationship, you are entering a laboratory. Every emotion, every conflict, every attraction is an experiment exposing what lives inside you. If you observe, you evolve. If you resist, you repeat. The modern world teaches you to perform, not to feel, to seduce, not to understand, to control, not to connect. But deep inside, your psyche craves wholeness, and wholeness requires the courage to look at the manipulator within. Pause for a moment. Ask yourself, when you try to change someone, what are you really protecting? Usually it's not love. It's fear. Fear that if you lose control, the mask will fall, and you'll meet the stranger living behind your eyes. That stranger is your shadow, and he's been waiting for you all along. When you begin to see the puppet strings, something terrifying happens. You can no longer hide behind innocence. You realize that every word, every gesture, every silence is a tool, sometimes for love, sometimes for control. You start to hear the subtle tones of power beneath ordinary conversations. People don't only want to be loved, they want to be needed, feared, obeyed. And so do you. Carl Jung warned that what we call personality is often a carefully constructed defense mechanism. The confident man hides the boy who was once humiliated. The charming woman hides the girl who once felt invisible. The louder the ego, the deeper the wound. In relationships, these wounds dance together. When a man lives with a woman, his shadow begins to negotiate with hers. He sees her through the filter of his complexes, and she sees him through hers. Together, they create a shared hallucination called us. It feels intimate, but it is still projection. Jung observed that love can quickly transform into manipulation when the ego fears loss. You start to speak not to connect, but to influence. You touch not to give, but to secure. You apologize not for empathy, but for strategy. Every act becomes part of an invisible contract. I will play who you need me to be if you play who I need you to be. But the unconscious keeps score. It waits for the moment when one of you breaks the illusion. When she sees the mask slip, or you feel your control fade, that's when the real work begins. The ego reacts with violence, not always physical, but emotional. It manipulates through guilt, through withdrawal, through the silent treatment that says more than any scream. It knows exactly which buttons to press, because it installed them itself. Jung believed that the psyche seeks balance. If the conscious mind becomes too rigid, the unconscious destabilizes it. That's why relationships often bring chaos after comfort. The unconscious refuses stagnation. It forces growth through conflict. A woman's tears may awaken your buried compassion. Her anger might reveal your suppressed fear of failure. Her distance could expose your dependency on validation. The more you resist the lesson, the harsher it becomes. The man who refuses to evolve repeats. The man who observes transforms. When you start to see your reactions not as truths but as symptoms, power shifts. You stop being the victim of emotion and become the observer of it. But awareness is not pleasant. It strips away excuses. It shows how often you manipulate under the banner of love, how many times you perform honesty while hiding motives. It is painful to admit that you used affection to control, silence to punish, kindness to earn obedience. Yet Jung insisted that confronting the shadow is the birth of authenticity. Only when you admit your capacity for manipulation can you choose integrity. Otherwise, morality is just another mask, a way to look pure while remaining divided inside. Look around. The world is addicted to control. Politics, marketing, religion, relationships, all built on psychological manipulation. People learn to craft identities that attract attention, sympathy, loyalty. They learn to sell emotions the way merchants sell perfume. Everyone is an actor in a play directed by the unconscious, but the cost of performance is emptiness. When you play too many roles, you forget the face beneath the mask. That's why so many people in love feel lonely. Because what they love is not being seen. It's being mirrored. They don't crave the other person. They crave the reflection of the self they wish to believe in. Jung said that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Transformation demands friction. Friction demands honesty. And honesty begins where manipulation ends. Ask yourself, how often do you tell the truth when it risks losing affection? How often do you use vulnerability as currency? Every time you shape your words to maintain control, the unconscious smiles, because it knows you still serve it. Freedom begins when you dare to lose. When you no longer need to win the argument, to be right, to be desired. Only then does the relationship stop being a power game and become a meeting of souls. Carl Jung never promised happiness. He promised awareness. And awareness is heavy. It isolates you from the crowd because you can no longer play its games. But that loneliness is sacred. It is the silence where truth grows. Pause again. Feel your breath. Notice the part of you that wants to control even now. Control the outcome of this moment. Control how you're seen. That's the shadow breathing. Don't fight it. Observe it. That's how integration begins. If this voice speaks to something inside you, stay until the end. Follow the channel, leave your like, and prepare for the next descent. Because the deeper we go, the more the masks will fall. When the need for control turns into dependency, the soul begins to rot quietly. You mistake the tension in your chest for love, the anxiety for passion, the fear of losing for devotion. But what you truly feel is addiction, the addiction to emotional certainty. Carl Jung warned that the unconscious feeds on attachment. It uses relationships to repeat the old drama of your childhood wounds until you recognize the pattern. At first, dependency disguises itself as connection. You want to be close. You want to feel safe. But the more you merge, the more you disappear. The self becomes a hostage to approval. You start to edit your emotions so the other person won't withdraw. That is how manipulation is born, not from evil, but from fear. You test love with small acts of control. A question here, a silence there. You say, "I'm fine," when you mean, "Come closer." You praise when you want to be praised. And soon the relationship becomes a closed circuit of mutual dependency, each partner feeding the other's ego while starving the soul. Jung wrote that every emotion we refuse to process consciously will control us unconsciously. Dependency is simply the shadow of abandonment. It is the inner child crying for security through the mouth of an adult. That cry distorts perception. You start to see the other person not as they are, but as the savior or villain of your unfinished story. So long as you need them to heal you, you will manipulate them to stay. You will trade honesty for harmony, authenticity for attachment. You will smile when you want to scream, forgive when you want to leave, and call it maturity. But the psyche knows the difference. Every false yes becomes a knot inside the soul. The unconscious loves repetition. It is its favorite form of education. You meet the same personality in different bodies, replay the same emotional script under new names. You swear that this time will be different. And it is, until the honeymoon ends. Then the shadows return, asking the same question they always ask. When will you finally see that this is not about them? To break the cycle, Jung said, you must withdraw your projections. Stop expecting others to complete the work you refuse to do. That means facing the loneliness beneath the dependency, the silence you have avoided your whole life. When you face it, something strange happens. You begin to hear yourself, and that voice, though fragile at first, is the beginning of real power. But awareness has a price. You will lose the comfort of blame. It is easier to accuse than to understand, easier to call someone toxic than to admit how their toxicity mirrors your own. Manipulators always come in pairs. One active, one passive, both unconscious. Each needs the other to maintain the illusion of control. Freedom begins when one of them refuses to play. When you no longer react to emotional bait, the spell breaks. The manipulator suddenly faces their own emptiness. They panic, because without your reaction, they must meet the silence within themselves. Jung compared individuation to alchemy, the transformation of lead into gold. Dependency is the lead, heavy, dull, repetitive. Awareness is the fire. You burn the illusions, and what remains is character. Most people run from that fire. They prefer the smoke of confusion. It feels familiar. They call it love because it hurts like childhood did. But real love is not the fire that consumes. It is the warmth that illuminates. And you cannot feel that warmth while chained to the need to be needed. Observe how society rewards dependency. Music, films, social media, all glorify the suffering lover, the endless chase, the pain of separation. We have romanticized emotional slavery. We mistake obsession for depth, drama for destiny. It keeps us entertained and asleep. Jung saw that the collective unconscious uses culture to maintain its illusions. As long as people are obsessed with each other, they never face themselves. That is why awakening always begins in isolation. You must first detach to see. Only then can you return to others without losing your center. When you stop manipulating, the world stops manipulating you. The moment you refuse to play the victim, predators lose interest. The moment you no longer crave validation, flattery becomes noise. And the moment you accept solitude, love becomes a choice, not a chain. Take a breath. Feel that quiet discomfort in your chest right now. That is the ego dying. Let it. The self that survives will no longer need to control. It will simply observe, understand, and allow. If these words resonate, stay close. Follow the channel, leave your like, and prepare for the next descent. In the next step, we will go deeper into the part of you that learns not just to see the darkness, but to use it consciously. Control dies slowly. Even when you see the illusion, part of you still clings to it. The mind whispers, "If I let go, who will I be?" That whisper is the echo of every dependency you've ever known. It sounds like love, but it is the shadow asking to survive. Jung said that the unconscious never disappears. It transforms through awareness. The task is not to destroy darkness, but to give it form. When you name a demon, it becomes human. When you deny it, it rules you from the dark. So you begin to watch yourself. You notice how the hunger for attention hides inside kindness. You see the calculation behind generosity, the performance inside honesty. Each discovery feels like betrayal, but it is freedom. You're peeling away the layers of personality that were never yours. The world tells you that truth is light. Jung knew that light burns. Awareness sears illusions like fire licks paper. The more you see, the more fragile your old identity becomes. You realize that manipulation is not only a social weapon, it's an internal mechanism. The psyche manipulates itself to maintain equilibrium. It hides fear behind ambition, pain behind laughter, shame behind pride. And then, one day, you sit in silence and feel the whole machinery stop. No pretending, no audience, no script, just you, raw, ordinary, uncertain. The silence is unbearable at first. You've lived your entire life avoiding this emptiness, yet within it, something ancient stirs. Jung called it the self, the center that exists beyond ego and shadow, beyond masculine and feminine. The self doesn't need to control because it already contains everything. When you sense it, even for a moment, the game of manipulation collapses. You understand why love without awareness becomes imprisonment. You see that power without humility decays into tyranny. You start to notice this everywhere, in politics, in religion, in relationships. The desire to control others always masks the fear of facing oneself. People chase influence because they are terrified of insignificance. They preach morality while hiding their own chaos. The same energy that fuels saints fuels tyrants. The difference is consciousness. Jung observed that every collective madness begins as a personal repression. A man denies his shadow, a society denies its truth, and soon both project monsters onto the world. When you refuse to own your darkness, you create devils to fight outside you. That is how manipulation becomes ideology. To live consciously with another person is revolutionary. It means you stop using them as your mirror. You stop demanding that they carry your loneliness. You begin to speak without strategy, to listen without defense. It feels naked, almost violent in its honesty, because you are no longer performing. At first, this honesty will scare those who still live asleep. They'll call you cold, detached, arrogant. Let them. They're reacting to the mirror you hold up. Jung reminded us that what we hate in others reveals what we hide in ourselves. Keep standing in that mirror. The reflections will shift from faces to archetypes, from stories to energies. You will begin to see not individuals but patterns. The victim seeking a savior, the hero needing an enemy, the lover fearing abandonment. Once you see the pattern, compassion replaces judgment. You no longer hate manipulation. You understand its origin. The unconscious is not evil. It is primitive. It behaves like a frightened child, demanding attention through chaos. When you respond with awareness instead of punishment, transformation begins. The child grows. The shadow becomes an ally. And this is where real power emerges. Not the power to control others, but the power to remain centered while the storm rages. To watch emotion without drowning in it. To choose response over reaction. You realize that the strongest person is not the one who wins arguments, but the one who no longer needs to. The real victory is inner silence. When you stop manipulating, you become unpredictable, and therefore free. Freedom has a strange loneliness. You'll lose the comfort of the familiar drama, the rhythm of emotional highs and lows. But in that quiet, life begins to reveal itself as it truly is. Unpolished, imperfect, breathtakingly real. You start noticing beauty in trivial things. The sound of footsteps, the flicker of light on a wall, the raw hum of existence. That is consciousness reclaiming the world from the filters of the ego. And one night, as you sit in that stillness, you'll realize something profound. You never needed to control anyone to feel safe. You only needed to understand yourself. That understanding doesn't make life easier. It makes it honest. And honesty is the beginning of peace. If you have followed this far, you are already different from who you were at the start. Keep walking. In the next descent, we will explore the final paradox Jung left us, how embracing the shadow becomes the source of compassion. Follow the channel, leave your like, and prepare for the last step. The light is waiting behind the darkest door. To embrace the shadow is to make peace with your own darkness. Carl Jung said that the one who looks outside dreams, but the one who looks inside awakens. And awakening is not a light that blinds the dark. It's the moment you realize that the dark itself was never your enemy. You've spent your life running from it. The guilt, the anger, the manipulation, the need for control. But everything you've judged in yourself was only the wounded part of you asking to be seen. The shadow is not evil. It is energy without guidance. Once integrated, it becomes strength, creativity, empathy. When you stop fearing your darkness, you stop projecting it onto others. You no longer need to destroy what reminds you of your own weakness. You understand that every person you meet is fighting the same invisible war, between who they show and who they hide. That's when compassion is born, not the soft pity of morality, but the raw compassion of understanding that every sin is a symptom of pain. You forgive not because you're superior, but because you finally see yourself in the other. You recognize the manipulator, the liar, the coward, because you've met them in your own reflection. Jung believed that wholeness is not achieved by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. It's easy to preach virtue when you've never met your shadow. It's harder, but far more human, to admit that the same mind that loves can also deceive, that the same heart that heals can also hurt. The ego wants purity. The soul wants totality. When you embrace both, you become dangerous, not to others, but to illusion. Because a person who accepts their darkness can no longer be manipulated through guilt or fear. You can't be controlled by shame when you've already faced the part of you that could do anything. That's real freedom. Not innocence, but integration. The man who lives with awareness becomes unpredictable. He doesn't react the way the world expects him to. He listens when provoked, smiles when insulted, walks away when challenged, not out of weakness, but out of mastery. He knows that every attempt to dominate him is only someone else's shadow begging for recognition. And when you meet such a person, you feel it. They don't need to speak loudly. Their silence carries weight. Their presence feels like truth. That is what Jung meant by the self, the silent center within you that has always been whole. It doesn't need to win or be right. It simply is. It watches the drama of life with compassion, not indifference. It acts without manipulation because it no longer seeks approval. You reach this point when you've burned every mask, surrendered every illusion, faced every fear. And in the ashes of what you thought was you, something eternal remains, awareness itself. This is the paradox Jung left us. To become whole, you must break. To find peace, you must face war. To love, you must first meet the part of you capable of hate. And to control your life, you must stop trying to control anything at all. So take this as the final descent. Look into your shadow. See the manipulator, the victim, the judge, the deceiver. Don't condemn them. Invite them home. They are not demons. They are fragments of you that have been waiting for light. When you integrate them, power returns. Not the power to dominate, but the power to be. To walk through chaos with calm eyes. To love without losing yourself. To stand in truth even when it costs you everything. That is the hidden truth every man must know before living with a woman, before loving anyone, before meeting the world. You cannot meet another until you have met yourself, and when you finally do, every relationship becomes sacred. Because it is no longer about possession, but about revelation. So if you've made it here, you've already begun the work. Stay awake. Observe. Embrace your shadow before it chooses to embrace you. And remember, the darkest place in the soul is not where evil lives, but where truth hides. Open that door. Step through. That's where your real life begins. If this journey spoke to you, follow the channel and share this message with someone who's ready to see. Because once you've looked into your own abyss, you never see the world the same way again.